Dasa is a Sanskrit word found in ancient Indian texts such as the Rigveda and Arthasastra. It usually means enemy or servant, but Dasa or Das also means a servant of God, devotee, votary, or one who has surrendered to God. Dasa may be a suffix of a given name to indicate a servant of a revered person or a particular deity. Dasa, in some contexts, is also related to dasyu and asura, which have been translated by some scholars as demon, harmful supernatural forces, slave, servant, or barbarian, depending on the context in which the word is used. Etymology. Dasa first appears in Vedic texts from the 2nd millennium BCE. There is no consensus on its origins. Karl Heinrich Chuck in 1806, in his translations of the Roman geographer Pomponius Mela, noted etymological and phonological parallels between Dasa and the ethonyms of the dai, Persian, Sanskrit dasa, Latin dai, Greek delta alpha omicron iota, daoi, delta alpha alpha iota, delta alpha iota daai, and delta alpha sigma alpha iota dasi, are people who lived on the southeastern shores of the Caspian Sea in ancient times. Likewise, Max Muller proposed that Dasa referred to indigenous peoples living in South Asia before the arrival of the Aryans. However, such theories have long been controversial and are considered by many scholars as inconsistent with the broader usage of Dasa in the Vedas. Munir Williams in 1899 stated that the meaning of Dasa varies contextually and means mysterious forces, savages, barbarians, or demons. In the earliest layer of Vedic literature, in other contexts, is a self-effacing way to refer oneself as worshipper or devotee aiming to honor a deity or a servant of God. In later Indian literature, according to Munir Williams, usage of Dasa is used to refer to a knowing man or a knower of the universal spirit. In the alter sense, Dasa is masculine, while the feminine equivalent is dasyu. Some early 20th century translations, such as P.T. Srinivasa Iyengar, translate Dasa as slave. Kangal in 1960, and others suggest that, depending on the context, Dasa may be translated as enemy, servant, or religious devotee. More recent scholarly interpretations of the Sanskrit words Dasa and dasyu suggest that these words used throughout the Vedas represents disorder, chaos and dark side of human nature, and the verses that use the word Dasa mostly contrast it with the concepts of order, purity, goodness and light. Quote, in some contexts, the word Dasa may refer to enemies. In other contexts it may refer to those who had not adopted the Vedic beliefs. And yet other contexts it may refer to mythical enemies in the battle between good and evil. Michael Witzel, in his review of Indo-Iranian texts in 1995, states that Dasa in the Vedic literature represented a North Iranian tribe, who were enemies of the Vedic Aryans, and dasyu meant enemy, foreigner. Quote, he notes that these enemies could have apparently become slaves if captured. Witzel compares the etymological root of Dasa to words from other Indo-European languages that imply enemy, foreigner, including the Avestan Dahaka and Dnha, Latin Dahi and Greek Daai. Asko Parpola in 2015 has proposed that Dasa is related to the ancient Iranian and Proto-Saka word Daha, which means man. Parpola states that Dasa referred only to Central Asian peoples. This is contrasted with Arya, the word for man used by and of Indo-European people from Central Asia. Consequently, a Vedic text that include prayers for the defeat of the Dasa as an enemy people, according to Parpola, possibly refers to people from the so-called Bactria Marjana archaeological complex, who spoke a different language and opposed Aryan religious practices. Parpola uses archaeological and linguistic arguments to support his theory, but this is controversial. Dasa in Buddhist texts can mean servant. In Pali language, it is used as suffix in Buddhist texts, where Dasa was translated by Davidson Steed in 1925 as a slave by birth, Kila Dasa translated as a bought slave, and Dasa as one who sees Amatma Nibbana. Hindu texts, Rigveda, Dasa and related words such as dasyu are found in the Rigveda. They have been variously translated, depending on the context. These words in some context represent disorder, chaos and dark side of human nature, and the verses that use the word dasa mostly contrast it with the concepts of order, purity, goodness and light. Quote, in other contexts, the word dasa refers to enemies, and in other contexts, those who had not adopted the Vedic beliefs. A. MacDonald and A. B. Keith in 1912 remarked that the great difference between the Dasas and the Aryans was the religion. It is significant that constant reference is made to difference in religion between Aryans and Dasa and Dasyu. Dasa with the meaning of savage barbarians. Rigveda 10.22.8 describes Dasas as savages who have no laws. Different observances are common and who act against a person without knowing the person. Dasa with the meaning of demon. Within the Vedic texts, Dasa is the word used to describe supernatural demonic creatures with many eyes and many heads. This has led scholars to interpret that the word Dasa in Vedic times meant evil, supernatural, destructive forces. For example, Rigveda in hymn 10.99.6 states, Dasa with the meaning of servant or slave. Dasa is also used in Vedic literature in some contexts to refer to servants. A few translate this as slaves, but the verses do not describe how the Vedic society treats the servants. R.S. Sharma, in his 1958 book, states that the only word which could possibly mean slave in Rigveda is dasa, and this sense of use is traceable to 4 verses out of 10,600 verses in Rigveda, namely 1.92.8, 1.158.5, 10.62.10 and 8.56.3. The translation of word dasa to servant or slave varies by scholars. H. Wilson, for example, translates dasa in Rigvedic instances identified by Sharma as servant rather than slave, as in verse 10.62.10. R.S. Sharma translates dasi in a Vedic era Upanishad as maid servant. Later Vedic texts, the 3 words dasa, dasyu and asura are used interchangeably in almost identical verses that are repeated in different Vedic texts, such as the Rigveda, the Saunaka recension of Atharvaveda, the Paribalada Samhita of the Atharvaveda, and the Brahmanas text in various Vedas. Such comparative study has led scholars to interpret dasa and dasyu may have been a synonym of asura of later Vedic texts. Sharma states that the word dasa occurs in Aitareya and Gopatha Brahmanas, but not in the sense of a slave. Arthasastra. Kautilya's Arthasastra dedicates the 13th chapter on dasas in his 3rd book on law. This Sanskrit document from the Maurya Empire period has been translated by several authors. Shamasastri's translation in 1915, Kangal's translation in 1960s and Rangarajan's translation in 1987 all map dasa as slave. However, Kangal suggests that the context and rights granted to dasa by Kautilya, such as the right to the same wage as a free laborer and the right to freedom on payment of an amount, distinguish this form of slavery from that of contemporary Greece. Edmund Leach points out that the dasa was the antithesis of the concept of Arya. As the latter term evolved through successive meanings, so did dasa, from indigenous inhabitant to serf, tied servant, and finally chattel slave. He suggests the term unfreed to cover all these meanings. According to Arthasastra, anyone who had been found guilty of nishpatata may mortgage oneself to become dasa for someone willing to pay his or her bail and employ the dasa for money and privileges. According to Arthasastra, it was illegal to force a dasa to do certain types of work, to hurt or abuse him, or to force sex on a female dasa, employing a slave to carry the dead, to sweep or urine of the leavings of food, keeping a slave naked, hurting or abusing him, or violating the chastity of a female slave shall cause the forfeiture of the value paid for him or her. Violation of the chastity shall at once earn their liberty for them. When a master has connection with a pledged female slave against her will, he shall be punished. When a man commits or helps another to commit rape with a female slave pledged to him, he shall not only forfeit the purchase value, but also pay a certain amount of money to her and a fine of twice the amount to the government. A slave shall be entitled to enjoy not only whatever he has earned without prejudice to his master's work, but also the inheritance he has received from his father. Buddhist texts. Words related to dasa are found in early Buddhist texts, such as daso napabhajetabo, which Davids and Steed translate as, "The slave cannot become a bhikkhu." This restriction on who could become a Buddhist monk is found in Vinaya Pitaka 93, Daya Nikaya, Majjhima Nikaya, Tibetan books Karmavakya and Upasampaddanapti. Jaina texts. Other uses. Use of religious devotees. In Tamil deity.Dasa, servant or slave, commonly used to refer to devotees of Vishnu or Krishna. In Gaudiya Vaishnava theology, Smriti statement Dasa Bhuto Hara Evananyasvivakadakana. Living entities are eternally in the service of the Supreme Lord. Thus designation for Vaishnava followers of Svalyam Bhagavan Krishna was the status title Dasa as part of their names, as in Hari Dasa. As a surname or by name, Dasa Das is also a surname found among Sikhs and Hindus, typically northeastern and western India, where it literally means votary, devotee, servant of God. For example, Mohandas Gandhi's first name, Mohandas, means servant of Mohana Krishna. Also, the name Surdis means servant of Suradeva. In the past, many sants of Bhakti movement tradition added it in the names, signifying the total devotion or surrender to God. Views of Sri Aurobindo. Authors like Sri Aurobindo believe that words like dasa are used in the Rigveda symbolically and should be interpreted spiritually, and that dasa does not refer to human beings but rather to demons who hinder the spiritual attainment of the mystic. Many dasas are purely mythical and can only refer to demons. There is, for example, a dasa called Urana with 99 arms, and a dasa with 6 eyes and 3 heads in the Rigveda. Aurobindo commented that in the RV 3:34 hymn, where the word Ayuvana occurs, Indra is described as the increaser of the thoughts of his followers. The shining hue of these thoughts, Sukram Varnamayasayam, is evidently the same as that Sukra Sveta Aryan hue which is mentioned in verse 9. Indra carries forward or increases the color of these thoughts beyond the opposition of the Panis. Pravarnamatirikakram. In doing so he slays the dasayas and protects or fosters and increases the area and color. Hatvi dasayan prayam varnim avit. According to Aurobindo, RV 5.14.4 is a key for understanding the character of the dasayas. Agni born shone out, slaying the dasayas, the darkness by the light. He found the cows, the waters, Swa. Aurobindo explains that in this verse the struggle between light and darkness, truth and falsehood, divine and undivine is described. It is through the shining light created by Agni, god of fire, that the Dasyas, who are identified with the darkness, have slain. The Dasyas are also described in the Rigveda as intercepting and withholding the cows, the waters and swar. It is not difficult, of course, to find very similar metaphors, equating political or military opponents with evil and darkness, even in contemporary propaganda. K.D. Sathna writes, according to Aurobindo, there are passages in which the spiritual interpretation of the Dasyas and Panis is the sole one possible and all others are completely excluded. There are no passages in which we lack a choice either between this interpretation and a nature poetry or between this interpretation and the reading of human enemies. Comparative linguistics. Dasa and related terms have been examined by several scholars. While the terms dasa and dasyu have a negative meaning in Sanskrit, their Iranian counterparts daha and dasyu have preserved the positive meaning. This is similar to the Sanskrit terms deva and asura. The Iranian counterparts of these terms have opposite meanings. Askoparpola states the original dasa is related to the Old Persian word daha, which also means man, but refers specifically to a regional ethnic minority of Persia. Parpola contrasts daha with Arya, stating that the latter also referred to man, but specifically to the incoming Indo-Iranians from Central Asia. The Vedic texts that include prayers to help defeat the Dasa as enemy people, states Parpola, may refer to the wars of the Indo-Iranians against the bearers of the Bactria Marjana archaeological complex culture. The latter spoke a different language and opposed Indo-Iranian religious practices. Parpola uses archaeological and linguistic arguments to support his theory, but his theory is controversial.